Welcome everyone to a very special bye-week edition of our Packers News live chat alongside Jim Owczarski. I'm Olivia Reiner. Just because it's the bye week doesn't mean we have to say goodbye to our lovely audience. Let's take a pulse on where the Packers are at on offense and on defense through 4 weeks. Before we begin, I want to remind you, as always, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question, leave us a thought you're having. Jim and I will get to some of those toward the end of our conversation today. Jim, quarterback Aaron Rodgers has never played better through 4 games. He has over 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns, and not a single interception thrown. He's on pace for over 4,800 yards and 50 touchdowns. Jim, in 15 seasons, Aaron Rodgers has never played this well. How likely is it that he's able to attain those numbers?
Well, I think only 2 quarterbacks have thrown for 50 touchdowns, so I think the math says that's unlikely. But just in general, though, Olivia, I mean, this is why Matt LaFleur was hired, to help a aging Hall of Famer extend his career and still play well and not have to go into the phone booth and turn into Superman, because he just can't do that anymore. I mean, at times last year we saw, I think it was a 4-game stretch where he played amazing. And he can, obviously he's still a high-end talent, of course, but this is why he was brought in to run play actions, to have an offense where, as he says, receivers are college wide open. And why are they college wide open? Because they're schemed up that way. They're running bunch formations and motions and all these different things that allow that to happen. Combine that with the skill set of an Aaron Rodgers, and then this is what you get.
Jim, the Packers are the first team in NFL history to score over 150 points through 4 games and not throw a single interception. However, it's not just a couple of players that are making plays every single game. It seems like every week there's somebody different that's stepping up. This past week against the Atlanta Falcons, it was tight end Robert Tonyan and running back Jamal Williams that had career nights. What about this offense allows anyone to be the star?
I think that's exactly right. It's the offense, right? And again, we'll remind viewers and listeners that excuse me there, my screen went black. So that this offense is this. So go back to Denver with Mike Shanahan, right? And when they beat the Packers in the Super Bowl. Now there were stars on that team, if you will, but ever since then, you had the cycle of endless Denver running backs after Terrell Davis that ran for 1,000 yards, went to a Pro Bowl. And then you had guys like Brian Griese and Robert Griffin III and Jay Cutler going to Pro Bowls. You had Rex Grossman and Matt Ryan winning MVP. Grossman had a career year. So where I'm going with this is everywhere this system has been, name players become that, if that makes sense. Every Packers fans want Taylor Gabriel signed. Why do they know who Taylor Gabriel is? Because he was cut by the Browns, went to Atlanta, and played under Kyle Shanahan and had a great year in a Super Bowl run. And so the why is I guess, Olivia, is just the way it's set up, and in terms of, again, the motions, the bunches, and also finding the right players who can understand the offense and execute it properly. And what I mean by that is run the routes to the right depth, to the right steps. Don't bump off your own guy when you're going to do crossing patterns. Don't have a penalty when you do a natural pick. I mean, so there's a lot to it, but that's why it's not so much that they don't want to have Devontae Adams or great players or first-round picks. It's just kind of set up to make do with what you have.
Head coach Matt LaFleur's offense is among the best in the league. However, the defense, not quite the same. They rank 12th in points allowed and 18th in yards allowed. However, we have seen some progress on a weekly basis. Just last week against the Falcons, the Packers defense was much more stout in the red zone and they limited explosive plays. Jim, for the Packers to keep winning, how desperately do the defense need to play on the same level of the offense?
This is interesting because for how many years, Olivia, Packers fans just shouted, if the defense can be average, that's all you need. Well, that's kind of where they're at, right? A number 1 ranked offense and a defense that's hovering about middle of the pack. That's good enough for the regular season, honestly, Olivia. I mean, they're going to one more win against Detroit, one more win against the Vikings is coming. They're better than the Bears, but let's just call it a split. Let's just say. So there's 3 wins. Who else is on the schedule? The AFC South is in shambles, quite honestly, from either COVID to its best team to the worst team has already been fired. The head coach has been fired. So where I'm going with that, Olivia, is they can win 13 games as is, in my opinion. The question is, can this defense win playoff games against Seattle, San Francisco, the Los Angeles Rams? And that's to be determined. I don't know if I've seen enough yet that they can stop a dedicated run game or an offense that's sort of built like the Packers.
This time last season, the defense came out really hot, especially when it came to forcing turnovers. Last season in 2019, they had about 8 turnovers through 4 games. This season, they only have 3. Why hasn't the defense forced nearly as many turnovers?
I think right now it's who they've played. I mean, the one, they intercepted Kirk Cousins, and our listeners know how I feel about Kirk Cousins. So that's yeah, you're going to intercept Kirk Cousins. Drew Brees doesn't throw picks. And Matt Ryan does turn the ball over at times. He is willing to put the ball in coverage, and he did that on Monday night. The Packers just didn't. Look, there was one for sure. Chris Barnes made a leaping deflection. It looked like Darnell Savage Jr. would have caught it. I mean, they're DBs for a reason. They don't always catch everything. So that looked like that could have been one. So I think the interceptions are more just, I don't want to say luck, but can they hold on to it? Jair Alexander always says that, right? If I just catch it, it's an interception. So they're in position for that. I think, Olivia, the fumbles or lack thereof, that's kind of interesting. And I think mainly that's because they're more interested in just stopping the run and getting the guy to the ground as opposed to just raking that ball out, which, let's be honest, Olivia, they probably should focus on the fundamentals of tackling and stopping the run before they start trying to peanut punch the ball out.
Let's continue on our conversation about the defense. We'll start with a question from our friend Jordan. Jordan, let's throw it to you first. Jordan says outside linebacker Preston Smith in coverage isn't working and he seems uncomfortable. There are 5 other guys that can play that role much better. Defensive coordinator Mike Pettin has been using outside linebacker Preston Smith much more often in coverage this season. It was primarily outside linebacker Kyler Fackrell's role last season. However, he left in free agency. Jim, why is Pettin continuing to use Smith in coverage when last season he was one of their top pass rushers?
Yeah, I'm really curious if Randy Ramsey's, preseason or training camp groin injury really threw a wrench into Pettin's plans there. Ramsey looked like the best cover outside linebacker in camp, for whatever that's worth. Now, he'd be a rookie in that sense, so there'd be some responsibilities. You'd have to trust him. But invariably there's always a rookie, right, Olivia? They got to make a debut. So Ramsey was out. That was off the table. I don't think Jonathan Garvin is there yet. When he's played as pass rusher, Rashawn Gary isn't there yet. You don't want Zadarius Smith to do it. So now all of a sudden you just ran out of bodies, to be honest, at the beginning. And I think that's why we've seen Oren Burks moved from inside linebacker to outside linebacker is strictly for this reason. I think they don't want Preston Smith doing this. He's put on a brave face. He said all the team things. Let's be honest, they're not paying him top 5 pass rush money to create linebacker island, So I think that's why Burks is there. Ramsey's working his way back, Olivia. I think you've been at practice last couple of weeks. I think he's getting healthier. So expect to see more Burks, maybe Ramsey, and Preston Smith getting after the quarterback a little more after the bye.
For now, Preston Smith Island looks like it's going to continue. However, perhaps not in his best interest, not exactly what he's best at doing. Thank you so much, Jordan, for your question. Let's continue on our theme of the defense with a question from, we're missing our friend, exactly. I've already lost the question. I had it in a moment. I'll move on and I'll try to find exactly where that question went. I apologize. It was about Jair Alexander. We'll start with Luke. Luke asks, how much better will this defensive front be when defensive lineman Kenny Clark returns? Kenny Clark has been out several games with an undisclosed groin injury. It's been plaguing him. He's been preparing every single week. He's been practicing for the last about week and a half, almost 2 weeks now. He's been practicing and preparing as if he's going to play in these past 2 games. However, he didn't play in either of them. Jim, how much better is this defensive line when Kenny Clark is healthy?
Oh, of course, they're markedly better. I mean, he's an $80 million highest paid, defensive tackle, nose tackle, however you want to call him, in football. And he's played, 15 snaps this year? Getting hurt right before halftime of week 1. So, yeah, of course, they're going to be so much better, just like the offense will be better when Devontae Adams is back. I think what will be interesting, Olivia, is Mike Pettine has gone out of his way to say Tyler Lancaster has been – I'm going to paraphrase and read between the lines, but it sounds like Tyler Lancaster's been their best defensive lineman in the weeks. He said he's graded out at 100. I don't know what those responsibilities are. He's not a pass rusher. And where I'm going with that is I wonder if to help with the run, if we see more Clark and Lancaster together, and I wonder if Dean Lowry and Kingsley Keke might be splitting more snaps because we've seen more pass rush out of Keke than Lowry to this point. Lowry is more of a first and second down type of guy in defense. But, yes, Clark will make them better, and his return at full health, I wonder if that'll create some different matchup options for Pettine after the bye.
Defensive coordinator Mike Pettine was very complimentary of Tyler Lancaster's ability to handle double teams. He said, it's often a thankless job. We'll see exactly how Pettine decides to use Lancaster and some of the other defensive linemen once Clark returns. Thank you so much, Luke, for your question. The question that I was going to go to is actually another one of Luke's questions. Luke also asked, is it fair to say that cornerback Jaire Alexander has become a true shutdown corner? His game against Atlanta was impeccable. Jaire Alexander was matched up against wide receiver Calvin Ridley against the Falcons, and on the 5 times that Ridley was targeted, he didn't have a single catch all night. When does Jaire Alexander get the respect that he thinks he deserves, Jim?
Well, there's a couple things here. Pro Bowl, All-Pro. All-Pro might fit under the David Bakhtiari category where he has more All-Pros than Pro Bowl. And sometimes Pro Bowl, that comes when you have a bunch of interceptions or some highlight plays. And frankly, as we talked at the top of this, Olivia, about turnovers, he's got to catch a few. So in terms of bat recognition, that's kind of an interesting thing. Now, in terms of shutdown corner, I don't know if those exist anymore to a degree. The league is set up in a way where even those guys, your number one corners they're gonna lose at times. I think the days of what Deion Sanders and Darrell Green were, or what even Darrell Revis was 15 years ago, I don't think the game is built that way. And let's be honest, if Matt Ryan throws a better ball in the first quarter, Calvin Ridley's got a 50, 60-yard completion on Jaire Alexander. I mean, he was beaten. It was a poorly thrown ball, and Jaire was able to close and defend the pass. Now, that's credit to him. But, I mean, that goes to show you the line we're on here, where 0 for 5, it looks great, versus a throw that's 4 yards where it should have been, and it's a little different conversation. So where I'm going with that is, yes, he is very good. He's playing at a Pro Bowl level. Shutdown corners, I guess, I don't know if they can exist in this current NFL.
Thank you, Luke, for 2 great questions. Let's move on here. We'll start with a question about the bye week specifically I apologize, I'm having a hard time locating everything. Here we go, Mark. Mark says, is this a good time for the bye week, or is it too early in the season? Jim, on one hand, last season, the Packers had a week 11 bye, allowed them to build as much momentum as they possibly could, get as far through the season as they possibly could, use that time for a little bit of a break, and then finish out the season strong. However, this week, it's a week 5 bye. That being said, the Packers have a number of injuries to various players, including wide receiver Devontae Adams with the hamstring, defensive lineman Kenny Clark with the groin, Christian Kirksey, inside linebacker, with the pectoral injury. The list keeps on going. They have several players on injured reserve who are also going to be using this time to get better. Wide receiver Equinemius St. Brown and inside linebacker Kamal Martin are both currently on IR and are eligible to return now. They've already spent their 3 games on IR because they were placed there before the season started. How appreciative are the Packers of this bye at this point in time?
Well, I'll agree with our colleague Tom Silverstein, who says, the bye is always helpful whenever it comes because there's always injuries. It's a 100% injury rate. So in that way, it's a good thing. Covering the game as long as I have, players tend to like to have it more mid-season. It just breaks up everything and it gives you, it breaks it up. And you don't have what the Packers are going to have now, Olivia, which is 12 consecutive games to end the regular season. And they expect to go to the Super Bowl. So you're talking 13 in a divisional round if they get a bye, 14 NFC Championship game. So you're talking 12 straight weeks before a bye. If they don't get the number 1 seed, remember, folks, there's no bye for the number 2 seed anymore. So if they don't get that 1 seed, you're talking 15 straight weeks to get to the Super Bowl, barring no COVID setbacks, which is a whole other thing. So that's a whole, think about it. They're 4-0, but they are now in a position where they have to play essentially a whole season in a row. And one on a short week going to San Francisco. So it's a long way to say I don't think it's ideal. I think they would have preferred to have a week 8, 9, or 10 bye. But you're right, Olivia, there are people who are hurt, and at least going into Tampa, they should be at more full strength coming out of it.
Jim, as you mentioned, that's not considering any of the COVID-19 impacts that could possibly happen, as we've seen with the Tennessee Titans, who are on the brink of losing yet another game, or at least seeing another game postponed this upcoming weekend as they continue to see positive tests for an outbreak on the team. We have a question here from Linda. Linda asks, since coronavirus is so bad in the Green Bay area, are most of the players going to hang around and be in Green Bay, or are they allowed to come into Lambeau and work out? As the NFLPA has reported, Green Bay has the worst COVID-19 average positivity rate per capita per 100,000 people in the population at 86.4, or 86.4, I believe. Yes, is the number of positive tests on a 14-day average per 100,000 people. That is by far the biggest number out of all other cities in the NFL currently. Jim, what exactly are the Packers doing right now over their bye week that they aren't allowed to leave Green Bay?
Yeah, Linda, it's a good question. Because of that, and also I think just it's not just the Packers. Every team's going to deal with this now. They're not allowed to go anywhere. It's by mandate from the league. Aaron Rodgers said, and they knew that after the game Monday night, Aaron Rodgers just flat out said it sucks to have to stay in Green Bay on a bye week. He along with, I think, Mercedes Lewis are definitely guys who want to go back to California and spend time for a week. Guys have homes and families in other cities as well. And I think the team had started to create or did create things for them to do. And then Matt LaFleur had to say Tuesday, well, because of what's going on around the league, all of that had been scrapped or had to be altered because new COVID protocols were coming down the line. And really, there's no one else to blame but the players in Tennessee and to a degree in New England. They didn't do the things they were supposed to do. And so now the entire National Football League and its players and coaches have to deal with that. But again, Linda, in terms of the Green Bay area, that's why you hear Matt LaFleur talk about protecting the community. And it's not just the players and the Packers and the coaches, but everyone else in the Fox Valley area. They continue to say mask up, social distance for that reason.
Thank you, Linda, for your question. That is going to do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back next week as the Packers gear up for their road game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Make sure you're checking out everything over on PackersNews.com. We'll have lots of great content up over there for you over the bye week. For Jim, I'm Olivia. We'll see you next time.